Okay, so welcome to a new guide on this channel, and on this occasion is the MS-20 from Arturia. Now, this is not a review, this is a deep dive guide about this synth. Everything on this guide is in chapters, so if you look at the description or the timeline, you can jump to a section or skip the ones you don't want. Now, if you like what I do, please like and subscribe, and if you have the money and you want to buy me a coffee, everything is on the description. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. I'm gonna go to a template and always start from default so we can all start from the same place. And we're gonna start with the oscillator 1 and 2. Right here you have the volume mixer, so if you go all the way down and you play something, nothing will come out. I'm gonna go and play the number 1. So on the number 1, you have some basic waveforms, and if you're thinking, okay, so the 1 is pretty much the same than the 2, no, they are not. So the first one, you get a triangle, and we can see it right here. And notice that it's not a kind of a super perfect triangle, and that's fine actually. Saw, and we get the same thing. Let me go higher. You get a saw, pulse. Now the thing is that with the pulse, you can go and make it narrow. This knob will just control the pulse width. And of course you can do it manually. And this is how we do it on the original one. You get another one, which is the noise. Now, in terms of range, and for now, I'm just going to go to maybe a triangle. In terms of range, you can go from 32 all the way to 8, 16, 8, and then 4. Now, on the original hardware, you don't get something with the pulse. With the pulse, you can modulate it manually. Let me go maybe here. You can do something like this. And notice that nothing is happening. And it's because the pulse only works when you are on pulse. So you can just, modify right here the width of the pulse, and it makes sense. And this is how we do it with the original one. Now, if you go too much, it's going to be too narrow, and it's just going to be pure silence, pretty much. Now, on the original one, you cannot connect, or you cannot add or make this knob modulate by itself. We cannot use an LFO to do it, not even through the patch bay. Now on this version right here, you get something that says PW modulation, so this one can do pulse width modulation with an LFO, which is something that we don't get on the original one. Now if I play something, notice that now we get nothing. You can do it manually right here, but then if I go up, it's going to start moving and doing that pulse width modulation with an LFO. And if you're asking which LFO, it's going to be this one. And if it says MG right here, it's because it's modulation generator, aka, LFO. So yeah, that's your LFO, something very common we get on a lot of synths. Then we're gonna talk about the modulation generator in a couple minutes. Okay, so I'm going to go back to default again, and we need to talk about the oscillator number 2. And it's because it's quite different. So if I go to the number 2, I need to go all the way down on the first one and all the way up on this one. And we get the same saw. We get the same square. But then, of course, the next position is going to be a square, but it's going to be a narrow square or a pulse. Notice that it's very narrow. Now, maybe you're wondering, okay, so we can change, the pulse width. No, this is only for the oscillator number 1. You are not going to be able to change the pulse width on the oscillator number 2. You get a ring mod. Now, this ring mod is, ring modulation. You have many ways of creating a ring modulation. Depends on the components that the hardware uses. And on this one, it's pretty specific. Maybe you're going to go right there, and we get a very cool sound, this ring modulation sound. This one is going to be tied to the pulse right here. So if I play something and go to this one, and I move it, notice it's changing. And it's because, of course, to create pulse to create ring mod, you need 2 sources. So the other source is going to be the pulse of this oscillator. That's why when we change, the pulse width is kind of changing. So you need to bear that in mind. It doesn't matter you're standing on a saw or you're standing on a triangle. That doesn't matter. It's using the pulse. Alright, so that's, the ring modulation. It's something pretty common that you get on pretty much, not every synthesizer, but on a lot of synthesizers. You get your pitch. I'm going to go to a saw. You get your pitch. You can go all the way down, or you can go all the way up. Pretty simple. If you double click, it's going to go back to the beginning. And what you can do right here, you can right click with the mouse, and you can make kind of a fine adjustments to your semitones. This is something pretty common with Arturia synths. And there we go, you just can kind of detune it. So right here at the bottom, you can see that they are different. So like I told before, the oscillator number 2 and 1, they kind of look pretty much the same, but they're not the same. This one goes really low, and this one cannot go super low. It can only go to 16s, but it can go higher. So you have a different range right here. And the trick is that you need to make a combination of both to get the sound that you want. Right? That's the whole point. Right, so the next thing that you get on the oscillator number 1 and 2 that you don't get on the hardware, it's unison. Of course, the original hardware is a monosynth. You cannot do unison. So if you don't know what unison is that you grab your whatever amount of voices that you have on your synthesizer and you stack them on top of each other. And then of course you detune them to get this kind of a big, super wide sound. Now, since this is a monosynth, you cannot do, unison. But they add it because this is a plugin, so we can do it. So right now, unison is off. And for now, I'm just going to maybe use one single oscillator. So right now, unison is off. So if we play a key, it's just going to be one single voice. Now, if I go right here at the bottom, notice it says it gives you the play modes. But when you enable unison, it will give you an extra option. It's going to tell you, all right, so how many unison voices do you want to use? Now, you cannot go to 16, of course. You can do 2, you can do 3, and usually 3 and 5 are just more than enough. So this is going to give you that unison sound. Notice that we get it already. And it sounds like the voices are just kind of sound a little bit phasey. It's because this is the spread control. Whenever you separate the voices, since you're stacking many voices and they are all in the same spot, it sounds phasey. But as soon as you detune them, you're gonna get this kind of a beautiful unison sound. Now, if you go crazy, of course, you're gonna get that beehive type of sound. Alright, so I'm going to go back to the beginning. I'm going to go to default. So the next thing that you get right here that you don't on the hardware, it's going to be the oscillator sync. So if you don't know what oscillator sync, this is a very classic sound that, it's been here since, I don't know, 70s, maybe something like that. So what this does is that the oscillator number 2 will be in sync with the number 1. So this is the slave and this is the master. And what this means is that the frequency of this one will be restarted, the cycle will be restarted to be in phase with the original one, with the master one, the oscillator number 1. And this is going to change completely how it sounds. I'm going to go all the way down on the oscillator level of the number 1, and I'm going to go all the way up on the oscillator number 2. Now remember, we are in sync mode. So this is the slave and this is the master. So if I play a key, we are going to be getting the oscillator number 2. That's fine. Now in theory, if I go up in semitones, we should be getting, some kind of a detuning, because we are just detuning it. And notice that doesn't happen. What we get is a different sound. It's not going out of tune, but we get this kind of a, harsh sound. So that's oscillator sync. The oscillator is being restarted to be in focus with the oscillator number 1. So if I change this one, notice that the sound is going to change of the second one. And I'm modifying the number 1 and we are not hearing the number 1. So whatever you do on the number 1 is going to affect the slave, because this is the master. Now, just by doing this, you can create amazing sounds. Let's say I'm going to be standing right here. Maybe I'm going to do something like that. And maybe here, I'm just going to go up. And the trick with oscillator sync is when you start separating the oscillators. If you're using pretty much the same configuration, you're not going to get a cool sound. You're just going to get a dull sound. So right now, if I go up in pitch, this is giving us that kind of a magic sound. Now, one very cool thing that you could do is to modulate the pitch of the oscillators when you are playing with an envelope. And I'm going to give you an example right now, but we're going to talk about in a minute in how this works. So this is the pitch modulation section. We're going to talk about this in a minute, but you can go to the oscillator number 2 and say, all right, I want to modulate the pitch of the oscillator number 2, and I want to do it by this much. So now when I play something, we get this cool sound. Right? So it's a very vintagey sound. So the next step is going to be talking about the pitch modulation, the thing that we just did. The things that we cannot move forward until we cover what is going to be used to do the modulation. So you get pretty much, it's very simple in terms of modulations. You get your modulation generator, aka LFO, you get an envelope generator, which is just an envelope, and we use it to run, of course, modulations. And then right here at the top, you get the envelope generator 2. This is the main envelope. This is the VCA envelope, right? So right here, if we take a look at the bottom, right here it says this one is going to be using the EG1, which is the EG Gen 1, the envelope generator 1. Then if you keep going on the other ones, which is the filters right here, and everything goes in a kind of a straight line fashion from top to bottom. This is the pitch, this is the cutoff for the lows, and this is the cutoff for the highs, the low pass and the high pass. And it says right here, this one will use the EG1 and then tag EXT. So we need to talk about later about the EXT. The EXT is about it's talking about the patch bay, when we connect something to external. And not pre-wired, right? So we are using the EG1, or we are using something on the patch bay, external. So, okay, so this is actually pretty simple. This is just gonna do modulation, or it's just pitch modulation. So when I play something, and right now I'm on the oscillator number 1, if I go all the way up on this one, nothing is gonna happen. But if I play now, we are gonna be getting that modulation. It's going to go from low to high, and so on and so on. All right, so that's what this one does. Now, the next one, what is going to be doing? Notice right here, it says EMG. So its modulation generator is going to use the LFO to run a pitch modulation. So if I go up again, this LFO is doing the pitch modulation. And this is pretty much how the panel works. The part right here at the bottom works with envelopes, and the part right here at the top works with the LFO. So in the case of this synthesizer, which is not something that you can do with the original MS-20, you can choose to do both, which is what you get on the original one. But on this one, you can do just the one, so you could be playing both, and you only get a modulation on the first one and not on the second one, which is, pretty cool. And you can go the other way, just like we did previously, and run a modulation on the number 2. Now, my question is, and what you should be asking is, how does the EG1 works? And we need to talk about this one right now. So the envelope generator 1, it's a pretty simple envelope. You get only an attack and you get a release. You don't get the sustain. You already get it, but you don't get to change it. And you don't have more knobs. It's just attack and release. And you also get a delay time. And we're going to talk about how this works. But this, again, works just like a normal envelope. If I try to do some modulation, and maybe I'm doing too much, notice that I play a key, and we can hear that something is going on, but it's super fast, and it's because the attack time is all the way down. So he's trying to, do that modulation, but it's super fast. If I want to make a slow kind of a going from down up, we need to go up on the attack time. Right? Pretty simple. Now, what's going to happen when we release the keys? Right now, we have no release time on the envelope, so I'm going to be doing something, maybe not that much, something like that. And now when I release the keys, since I'm providing a release time, and I release the key, it's going to go back to the original tone. If I provide no release time, it's going to go up, but then when I release it, it's just not going to go down. It's just going to go super fast, right? So we cannot perceive it. If I do it slow, it's going to slowly go back to the original tone. So again, this works just like a normal envelope. Now, the ability of having a delay time gives you the chance of playing something, and after a certain amount of time is going to do it, not when you play the key. In this case, you can go all the way up to 13 seconds, which is a lot. So if I go right here, make, 1 second or something like that, I play a key, we don't get the modulation, and then we get it. But we only get it after we play a key and 1 second and something passed. I play something, we get pretty much nothing, and then we go back. Right? So we're just delaying whatever it is that we are doing by this amount. So then at the top, and this is something that you don't get on the original one, and it's super, super cool. So you get a loop, you get a gate, and you get a trigger. So by default, it's gate. And this is what you get on the original one. You get a kind of a gate. So what this means is that, for example, and I'm going to give you a good example. I'm going to do this modulation, right? I'm going to press a key and I'm going to hold it. Right? So I'm pressing and I'm holding. Notice that the sound moves all the way up and it's sustaining right there at the top. And this is because we do have a sustained stage on this one. If we didn't have a sustained stage, it wouldn't be sustaining. It's just going to trigger, go all the way up, and then go all the way down. And this is going to be, what this means, a gate. Now, what happens if we go to trigger? So triggers are very small. They are just a trigger. They don't have a sustained stage. Sometimes you might, depends on the synthesizer and depends on what you're using. It might have a little bit of, kind of a tiny little sustain, but usually they don't get sustained. They're just going to be triggers. They trigger something and then go off. So in the case of this one, when we go to trigger, the same thing is going to happen. I'm going to play a key. I'm going to sustain it, but you're going to notice that it will not sustain. And I'm still holding. You can see that I'm holding right here. It's just going to go all the way up and then just go down because it's a trigger. Has no idea how to sustain. And that's the point, right? Now, then you get the other one, which is going to be the loop. And loop, it means that it will loop whatever you have right here. So maybe I want to do something kind of a fast, something like that. I'm going to be playing a key. It's going to do the modulation. And when it's done, it's going to start over and over and over again. Right now, I'm holding a key. So this is listening to the sustain. But since it has no sustain, it's going to go up and down following these instructions because it's a loop. Now, if we make shorter times, it's going to go faster. And you can create different sounds with this, of course. Let me just do a little bit of high pass. Right? So the gate, the trigger, and the loop, just like I said before, it's something that you don't have on the original one. It's something from this synthesizer. So back to a default, we always start from the same place. And now instead of just moving on to the filters, we're going to talk about the other thing with the pitch modulation, the modulation generator. Now, on the hardware unit is a pretty basic, simple, and straightforward LFO. And right here, you do get a very simple, straightforward LFO. Now, everything gets, we can make it a little bit better when we use the patching capabilities. But right from the start, the pre-wiring is just easy peasy. Notice that if you go and take a look at right here, notice that on the on the outside you get kind of a pulse, a narrow. It goes to a pulse and then it goes to a different type of pulse. But this is what you get. And then on the inside you get right here a triangle. Then a saw, a ramp down. Then you get a triangle, and if you go all the way up, you get a ramp up. So this is how it works. If you are all the way right here, there's going to be a ramp down. If you go to the middle, to the center, or maybe to 5 in this case, it's going to be a triangle. And if you go to the other way, it's going to be a ramp up. This is how it works. Later, we're going to be talking about how we can change this to a different type of, LFO, like square. So in this case, we are going to be doing some kind of a pitch modulation with the oscillator number 1. So if I play a key, we get it, right? Let me just cut a little bit of the frequencies, and I'm going to add a little bit of peak so we can really see how it's moving. Maybe I'm going to go there. Maybe not that much. But we can see, it's moving up and down. And that's fine. Now, how can we control this? Remember, if you're in the center, it's going to be a triangle. If you go all the way down, it's going to start to shift between a triangle and a ramp down. Now we have a ramp down. Let me do a C. And if I go all the other way, there's going to be a ramp up. So this is how it works. You get the in-betweens or all the other ways. Now, of course, on this one, you can go right here and change how fast it goes. I can go really fast, or I can go super slow. And right now we see the motion. Triangle, ramp down, or ramp down, and then ramp up. Now, of course, since this is a synth, this one will, sync to your BPM or the BPM of your whatever DAW you're using. You can go to sync. It's going to be just sync. You can go into subdivisions, but notice that you don't have triplets and dotted. So if you go here, you can say, okay, I want triplets, and then everything is going to be a triplet. Or if you go right here, dotted, everything is going to be dotted. So in this case, I'm going to be going to time because, We can. So then at the top, it says free, or it's going to be saying reset. So this is talking about the phase. Now, by default on pretty much most synthesizers, the LFO is just a constant motion. It's going to output whatever instruction, let's say a triangle in this case, and it's just going to go and go and go. It doesn't matter if we play a key or not. And notice I'm playing different keys, many, just kind of tapping the keys. And notice that the light right here indicates how the LFO, it's kind of a moving. And even though I'm pressing keys, it's not restarting. It's always constant. And this is because it's free. And what this causes is that maybe if you're doing something like that, notice that if I tap rapidly, the modulation will begin on whatever the waveform is. That's why we get that going down. Now, what happens if I go to reset? Now, every time I play a key, this one is going to restart. And notice if I do something like that, notice the light is not going on, and it's because the waveform always starts from the beginning. Now the LFO is restarting following my keyboard. And notice that there's no motion, and it's because we always start from the same beginning, from the same place, start. Now, if I play and hold, or press and hold, it's just going to do the modulation for us, and it will always start from the same place. This is very useful, depends on what you want to do. If you don't want this kind of this motion, and you always want to start from a different place because you're holding keys, then you get a more constant type of modulation by doing the reset phase. So right here, you get something else that you don't on the original hardware, which is going to be the EG1 EXT. And if you think about this, it's pretty much the same. It's an attenuator. All of them are just attenuators. And this one is the attenuator for the EG1. So if you're doing a modulation, and let me kind of give you an example, maybe not that fast. We are doing a modulation with a triangle. Maybe I'm going to go to this one because it's just obvious. What we can do, we can use the EG1 to tell how this is going to be modulated. And if I notice it starts different. We get that wing, and then it goes to the modulation. And notice that we are not doing an EG1 right here. We are just doing an MG, a modulation generator. So this one is kind of connected right here, and it's just using the envelope first, and then it's going to the LFO. Now if I go right here, yeah. So again, this is a modulation for the actual LFO. If I do some delay, it's just going to take a long time. And if I go slower, it's going to take a long time because everything's super slow. And when the time is up, then we're going to go back to whatever we have right here. It's something pretty cool. You realize we just covered a lot, all the oscillators, the pulse width, the different modes, the modulation generator, the envelope generator. And I want to talk about this, and we need to talk about the envelope generator 2. So the 2 is going to be the one that controls how the sound goes out, pretty much. And it's, the VCA envelope. And if you think about this, you get, a lot more controls than you get right here. You get hold time. We're going to talk about this in a minute. And then you get your classic ADSR type of, envelope. Now, in this case, I'm not going to be explaining how an ADSR works. It's something that I'm going to be assuming that you already know, but we can easily hear how this works. So, of course, this one will control how the volume of the synth goes out. It's kind of a pre-wire to control the volume, the VCA. So if I play a key, notice that everything is super short, and we just get nothing, right? Kind of makes sense. So if I go up on the attack time, this is going to be how long is going to take for the synth to go up in time. And again, this is a time control. It's going to take 2 seconds to go up, and then the sound dies. And I'm still holding the key, and you can see it right here. So then it needs to go down. We maybe want to make it go down on a kind of a not abrupt way like it's doing it right now. If I go to the decay and do something, it's going to take some amount of time to die. So what happens when we hold a key? Right now, I'm holding a key. It goes up, it goes down to the decay stage and then it dies. So the sustain is going to the side if we want to stay somewhere in between. Maybe I want to go up, then decay it down, and then I want to sustain it at some point because I'm sustaining keys. So that's the sustain level. Now, if I release a key, it dies. So this is going to be the release. What's going to happen when we release the keys? So if I do something like that, go up, go down, we sustain, I'm going to release it in 3, 2, 1, and the sound fades, which is something that, that doesn't happen if we don't have a release time. So that's how it works on a nutshell. Now I'm going to go maybe something about like there. So then we have a hold time. So this is something that you get on the original hardware, and it's kind of weird. It's kind of something that belongs to the synth. You don't get it on a million synths, like let's say from from that time. So the hold time, what it does is going to give you more hold time. So this is going to be for the sustain level. So if the sustain is just going to be all the way right there, let me just give you right here. So the hold time is going to be applied right here. So we have some sustain maybe, and we have some release. We have no hold time. I'm going to press a key. We know we go up, then we go down, and then we sustain it. But the sound never dies because I'm holding a key. Now I'm going to release it in 3, 2, 1, and then the sound goes to the release stage. We know this. So the whole time, what it will do, it will say, or maybe let's control the sound, and it will tell the sustain, okay, you know what? Instead of going directly to the release time when I release the keys, I'm going to hold it for a certain amount of time, let's say 3 seconds, and then when this is up, then I'm going to the release time. So this is like an extra stage that you get after you release the keys, or maybe before you release the keys. So I'm going to be playing it, and you need to take a look right here. I'm pressing a key, goes up, then down to the decay. We are in the sustain now, and I'm going to release the keys. Notice that it's not dying. It's going to do it for this amount of time, and then it dies, and then it goes to the release stage. This is what the hold does. And I know it's kind of a pretty silly, but it's just the way it works. You can go to maybe shorter times. I'm going to press it, goes down to decay, goes to the sustain, and now we need to go to the release. When I release a key, it is not going, it's holding, and then it goes to the release time. Now it says classic right here at the top, and it's because this is what you get on the classic one. If you go to the modern, this is just going to be just kind of a changing how this works. And right here it says delay curve, the decay curve, and this is just going to affect the curves. So if maybe I'm right here, I'm going to go to maybe the center, I guess. And this is what it says on the manual. When we are right close to the center, it's going to be a linear curve, like it's just more linear. Now, if I go to the negative side, it's going to be an exponential curve. And if I go to the right side, or the positive side, is going to be a logarithmic curve. And that's just the only difference. Now, of course, it's very relevant in how, it works right here. But this is just a little bit, a little bit different. And if I go all the other way, when I play a key, it just works a little bit different. You're just messing with the curves. And this is more linear. And this is going to be really useful when we get to use it with the cutoff. So I'm going to go back to default, and I'm going to show you one more thing that you get right here. So if you look at the original MS-20 right here in this section, and I'm watching it right now, you get an empty spot. You just get a drawing or something, you just get something, but you get nothing. It's just an empty spot. So they decided to add some cool features. So what this is, in reality, is kind of a tremolo. So if you take a look, it says MG, which is the modulation generator, the LFO. And if I go up on this one and I play a key, notice that the sound goes up and down. So what we get is a tremolo. We can use a tremolo with whatever we have on the MG. If you go really aggressive, it's just going to go super aggressive. But maybe you just want a little bit, just a little bit of movement along with maybe the oscillators. Maybe right here. Maybe I'm going to use this one. And then you get, your tremolo, and you get your vibrato. So back to default, and we just covered pretty much everything. If you just, If you didn't notice, the only thing we need to cover is this section that we have right here, which is very important, is the cutoff frequencies for the low pass and the high pass. And it's like the main vibe of the MS-20, and it's because the filters are pretty unique on this one. They have a very particular sound. It sounds very aggressive at times, and we love it for that. So, okay, so let's just kind of begin with the basics just to cover this. I'm going to be maybe just using the oscillator number 1 and maybe the 2 so we can have more kind of frequencies right there. And notice it's kind of moving, and it's because we are detuning the second one, so we get a wider sound. So let me go down in volume just a little bit. You get your high pass and your low pass. Your low pass, what it will do, it will cut high frequencies. If I go all the way down, it's just going to be cutting high frequencies. Pretty easy to understand. Now then the other side, if I go and play a low key, it's going to be a little bit more obvious. It's a high pass. It's going to cut your low frequencies. And that is how, how it goes. It's kind of pretty aggressive. But that's fine. Now notice that how it cuts is a little bit different from the low pass. It's because there are different filters, but they cut different. Okay, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. So then you get your peak, and what the peak is going to be a peak, the resonance on the breakpoint of, whatever is you're cutting. So if you go up on the peak, you're going to be able to see that peak right there, especially when you move it. And this is kind of the MS-20 sound. It's really resonant and aggressive. And that's why we love it. But right there you get your peak. Of course, if you do too much, you're gonna start getting this, self-oscillating kind of sound. And if you go down, of course, it's gonna be less. And on the other side, if you're cutting lows, you can do pretty much the same thing, but you're gonna be doing it on the low frequencies. So you could have a combination of both. Right. So pretty simple stuff. This is just very normal. Now, one thing that you get right here is the link you don't have on the original one. This is something they give you right here. So the link is off. So it means that they are independent. It doesn't matter how I move them. They're not going to be in sync. Now, if I go to this one, it's going to be same, which means if I move this one is just going to be kind of be trying to offset the other one. If I maybe go right here, now let me just unsync and go right here, right? I'm going to maybe do something like that. And I'm going to do same. If I go right here and start moving it, notice they go the same way. And it's because it's on same. Now, if I go the other way, which is going to be the kind of the opposite, I go up, the other one goes down. And if I go down, the other one goes up. Pretty simple. And this is something very cool. And on the original hardware, you need to manually do it. And some people, what they do, kind of a very kind of a old school and just common technique with this. If you want to achieve something like this, what we do, we kind of put a rubber band right here, and we kind of do an 8. So when we move it, it's just the rubber band is just gonna move the other one. And we can kind of achieve some sound like something like this just by moving one with one single hand. And, it's kind of the vibe of the synth. It's a synth that you need to go and use your hands. It's not something that you just, set the oscillators and blah, 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 and so on, and then it's going to do the trick. It's something that it's going to give you a sound, and then you need to manually move the knobs. And it's kind of the vibe of the synth. So then at the bottom, you get the MK1 and the MK2. So I'm not going to go into technical. You have the information, because maybe if I tell you, it doesn't matter. You can go to the manual and it's going to say what this is based off. But if you go right here at the bottom, it's going to tell you right here what this is based. So it says filter revision changes the VCF circuit between the KORG 35 MK1 or the OTA, which is going to be the MK2. So it seems that, of course, back in the day, they've released a Mark 1 and a Mark 2, and they use different components. The sound of the filter changed. Not a lot, but it's kind of different. It sounds different. Now, it's not better, not worse. It's just a different sound. And you could use it for different purposes. So some people really prefer the sound of the second one. And some other people don't like it at all. Some other people like the Mark II, which is, you know, it sounds really different. Notice if I do something like that and I'm going here, on the other one, it's just kind of a super aggressive. If I go to the Mark I, it's just a little bit different. I need to go a little bit more there just to get it. They just work a little bit different. In my case, I just like both. It's just great having the two types of filters on a single unit. Right, so back to a default patch, and we need to talk about how we can modulate this. So we have a kind of 4 different options. Actually, it's 2. This one is the same than this for the low pass and the high pass, and so on and so on. So right here it says MG, and right here it says EG2. So MG is MG, modulation generator. So if I do something like this and something like that, I'm gonna bring both maybe, and we can maybe hear something there. If I go right here, we're going to be using the modulation generator to do an LFO, and we are pretty much doing something like this. We are using the LFO to modulate the cutoff. If you go really aggressive, it's going to be aggressive. If you go down, it's going to be less aggressive, because this is an attenuator. It decides how intense, you know, you're going to be. Right. So then you get the other one. It's going to be the EG2. And the EG2 is this one, not this one, it's this one. So if you think about this, we are using the envelope to modulate the cutoff up or down based on whatever envelope we have right here, just like we did with the pitch modulation and the EG1. Now the bad side, you know, the bad news is that the EG2 is connected to the cutoff is connected to the EG2, and the amp, which is the volume, is connected to the EG2. So if we change how this works because we want to modify how the volume goes out, we are modifying whatever instruction we are using to modulate the cutoff filter. Now, luckily, there is a way to kind of override this and just, you know, use it for the low pass filter and use something else for the amp. You know, we can do it. We can talk about this in a minute. So if I do something like this, notice that we do get some kind of emotion. So we need to do something right here. And there we go. We get that modulation that we like. Goes up, takes some amount of time to go up. We can go really slow. And then it goes down onto the decay. And if we want to sustain it at some point, we can add a little bit of sustain. But remember, this is also reacting to the volume. And if we add some release time, same thing is going to happen. We get some release time. So that's it on a nutshell. This is what we do with both attenuators. This one controls the LFO, and of course you can do both at the same time. Part of the magic. And also, if you wanted to, maybe I'm gonna be playing something lowish. You can do cut right here, but you can boost a little bit of that peak. You notice that the bass really goes up, and it's because we are cutting, but we are boosting. So we get that bass sound. And we can also do some kind of a modulation. Right. So pretty simple. And remember, and we're going to be talking about this when we get to this section, the 1, the 2, and the 3, these 3 knobs, attenuators, they are connected or pre-wired to the modulation generator, right? The LFO. And the ones at the bottom, they are connected to some kind of an envelope, either envelope generator 1 or envelope generator 2. Right, so back to a default patch, and we need to talk about the portamento and this funny little thing that says cutoff mod sidechain. So the portamento, I don't need to explain this. The portamento is just your glide. If you play a key and then you play a new key, it's just gonna go and glide to the next note. And of course, if you go down or up, it doesn't matter. It's just gonna go and do the glide. Right? Pretty simple control. Now we need to talk about this one, which is, I need to do some explaining. If I do some cutting right here, I'm going to do some maybe picking, something like that, something we can hear, maybe. and that's too much. So what I want to do maybe a little bit of envelope. And we can really hear the envelope doing its job. And we are on default patch. And we can hear it. Now, if I do something like this and bring some LFO, we are doing both. We are doing the LFO and we are doing the envelope, right? Okay. Now, if I play soft, it does the same modulation. If I play hard, you can maybe hear how I'm hitting the keys on my MIDI keyboard. The modulation is just the same. It doesn't matter if I play soft or I play hard. And this is something that, we get on the original one. It's not, very sensitive to MIDI. It's not sensitive at all. But on this one, we get a control to do this. So if I go all the way up, it's not going to change it. It doesn't matter. If I play hard or I play soft, it's not going to work. So this works whenever we use the patch bay. So if I'm using the out, and we are going to be talking about this, all the ins and outs. If I go here, it says mod generator. So this is going to be the kind of the patch base for this section. So this is the triangle, right? It's going to be the triangle that we are already using. So if I connect it to something like the cutoff frequency, in this case, what we are doing, we are replicating whatever we have on the pre-wiring of this control, of this knob. So we are doing exactly the same thing. But now, since we are going through here, this cutoff mod sidechain has a say. If I play a key, it's going to be very different. I'm going to go all the way down and I'm going to play soft. Notice it is a little bit more aggressive, and if I play hard, it doesn't matter. Now I'm gonna go all the way up on the velocity. So now this means we are listening to velocity, and whatever it is that you do on your keyboard, we are gonna be listening and applying it right here. So if I play soft, we get that, which is cool. Now if I play hard, the modulation is going to be a little bit more aggressive. Soft, hard, soft, hard. So yeah, so that's the difference, and it is actually something really, really useful. So we are now ready to begin with the patch bay, and we're going to go one by one, just providing an example and just checking out what they do. Now, this is going to take a little bit of time because, we have quite a lot of different patch ins and outs. So it's going to take a little bit of time, but, just be patient, and it's going to be very simple. This is one of the, the patch, kind of the panels that looks very confusing, but it's really not once you get to know it. It just looks confusing. That's all. Okay, so let's just begin. We always start from a default patch, and we are going to start with the most simple thing. So we know that right here on these three knobs, this one, and this one, they are connected to the MG. And the MG is the modulation generator. So when I do something like that, and I play something, and I go up, we are going to be getting our modulation, right? And it's the triangle. And we know this. Okay, so what if I wanted to change to something else like a square? Because we do have the power to use a square right here. So, okay, so right here, we need to go to the mod generator. Now, the mod generator, it's going to give you that. It gives you that triangle that we already have by default and we are pre-wiring, but you can grab your square. Notice that you have it right here. So what I want to do, I want to change this triangle for a square. So we don't change it here, we change it on the attenuators. So right now it's pre-wired to use the triangle, and I'm wiring this to use the square. Now, where can I put it? So I'm gonna go to total first. So when you go to total, it means that you're changing all of them. So all these three knobs are using the MG. Well, now they're not. They're going to be using the MG, but the square. That's what total means. And notice it says right here at the bottom, T and then XT. This is total external. That's what it means. When I play a key, instead of getting a triangle, I'm going to be getting a square. And that's the whole point. Right? So That's it. That's very simple. That's what total means. Right here, when you start learning this and you notice that you have some lines right here, you start to follow them. The total goes to the oscillators, goes to the filter, goes to the low pass. So, to the high pass and low pass. So that total means pretty much all of this section if you look at the drawing. Now, when you hover on one of the patch points, in this case on an in, it will light right here. It will give you a light or a pointer where it's going to just tell you what is going to be just changing. And all right, just very simple, right? Very easy to understand. Now, what if I wanted to do something else? Maybe I don't want to use to change this to a pulse. I want to change it to something else. Now, one more thing that you notice, just like the triangle, when we do a pulse, if you go all the way to the left, we have a different pulse. If you go all the way to the right, we have a different pulse again. It's more like a trigger. So right here, you just need to change to choose or select your poison. All right. So let's talk about the other things you have right here. What if I don't want to use the square on all of them? I just want to use the square right here and maybe a triangle right here and then something else right here. Well, you can, and you need to use this inputs. So this input will do that. Let's say I want to use a square just on the cutoff, like we just did. So I'm gonna go to the cutoff. And I'm going to be connecting this right here. It says low pass, cutoff filter. And when you hover right there, it should be giving you a pointer. And notice that the pointer is right there below, right here. So here's the catch. When you connect on total, this is going to change these knobs, the attenuators, the pre-wiring. But when you're connecting to the other ones, what you do, you change the pre-wiring of the knobs below. But you're not changing them all. You're just changing this one because you're now connecting this to the low pass. So now if I go down and I go up on this one, we are going to be getting that square, but it's just reacting on the low pass filter. Now, if I go to the other one and I do something like that, let me do a peak. Maybe not that much. Let me just find a sweet spot. Right now, we are using an EG. And notice that it doesn't sound the same. So if I go and change this one, now we are getting it. So you can do a triangle if you must. Let me disconnect this one and do a triangle. And now we can use a triangle on this one. But we are already doing it right here. It just makes no sense. Right. So that's what we do when we connect this right here at the top. So if we connect to, for example, the cutoff frequency right here, we know that on this one, we are allowing the square to do its job, the LFO, the square LFO. But right here at the top, we are pre-wired to the triangle. So you can do a blend of both. And notice that we do get a blend of both. Maybe if I do a little bit peak, if I bring this down, it's just a triangle with a square. So we are getting a blend of both. And that is really cool, something that you can do only when we're using the patch ins and outs. All right, so we can do this on the cutoff frequency. We can do this on the high pass, the low pass and the high pass. And then you have the other ones. We're going to talk about this one in a minute. But then right here, you get the frequency. So this one means this one. So right here, instead of using the envelope, we are going to be using the square to do the modulation. Let me just go right here at the top. Notice that we get that kind of a up and down, up and down. This is the pitch modulation made by the square. So we are just changing the behavior of this one. And then we have the other one, the pulse width in. And we know that the pulse width is going to be the pulse just applying an LFO to do that pulse width modulation. But by default, it's a triangle. If I go faster, you can hear that. By default, it's a triangle, but we can change it to a square. And now it's going to be a square. Right, super useful. Right, I'm going to go right here. Right, so notice that you get something that says freq or freq. So this is frequency, and this belongs to the mod generator. And when it's talking about frequency, it's talking about this frequency. Now notice that when I hover or just click right here, it's just showing me this attenuator. It's just something that we don't get by default. So this is by default is connected to the envelope generator, but you just can connect it to something else. And that's going to be modulating the frequency. Let's say I want to use the envelope generator number 2, which is going to be this one. So now this one is going to be using this envelope generator, not this one. So if I want to do maybe something like that, let me just do something useful, something we can hear. And I'm going to be allowing more. Notice it sounds different. Starts very slow. Let me do more attack time. But now we have the ability to use an attack, a decay, and a sustain. And it sounds different. So I'm going to go right here at the bottom. And notice it says noise generator. And maybe you're thinking, noise, why is this super useful? Well, right from default, we are on a default patch. If I go to noise, we just get noise. But the thing is that if we want to use noise, just using an oscillator just to do noise is just a shame. So what we can do is we can still use our waveforms, whatever it is that you want to use, and you can blend a little bit of noise with the signal. So now you have pink noise, and now you have white noise. So it's a little bit more complete than this one, which is what, we get the white. So if I want to do some white noise and, want to use it, we can use it in different parts, and we will in a few minutes. But maybe I want to use it on the whole thing. So that's why you get the external in. So when you use the external, it means that whatever you're going to be patching right here is going to go through the whole circuit, and it's going to go out at this point. It's going to go through the filters and then through the envelope generator, which is the VCA. So it will go here, it will get cut, and then go to the VCA. So if I play something, you cannot argue that it's a little bit annoying. Of course, we can cut it right here. But if we cut it right here, we are also cutting whatever we have on the oscillators. But that's fine, that's what we do. We just grabbing a sound source, and we are saying, okay, I want to play whatever we have right here along with the VCO, and then we're going to go and just cut it and do whatever it is that we want to do. Now, of course, you can create really cool sounds just blending this. But that's what it is, the noise in and the noise out. You get pink and you get white. Now again, it sounds a little bit annoying. And even if I go all the way down on the oscillators, we can hear the noise. Now this is useful, but maybe not that useful, because when we connect the pink or the white right here on the external in, it's super loud. So we don't have a way to control it, but we do. And if you go right here at the bottom, it says external single processor. That's it. So I'm going to disconnect this one. And now we are going to be talking about a little bit of what we can do right here, because we can do a lot. So the first thing you get right here is the signal in. So of course you connect something, and this is going to go through the whole chain. And you could go out as, in the middle of the chain. You don't need to go at the end. And this is going to give you different things. When you plug in a signal, you can cut the lows or cut the highs, or you can just lower the volume and then go out right here. And we're going to do it right now. So let's say that again. We have that example. I want to use some external sound. I want to use a white noise. Now, of course, I want to hear it, right? We are not getting anything. The only thing we are getting is just the oscillators. And now we get nothing. So, okay, so this one, the signal in level, is going to give you, of course, when you're peaking, when you're just driving too much. But this one, the first out, is going to be pretty much whatever that comes in after the signal level, you can use it. So if I grab this and go to the external signal and I play it, we get that white noise, just like we did before. But now if I lower the level, we get less, and we are not lowering the level of this. So now I can bring my oscillators, and we can control a little bit more what is going on with the oscillator. With the noise. If we want the low volume, if we want a lot of volume. Yeah, that's the trick. And not only that, if I disconnect this one right here, we go to this section, and this one is after the band pass filter. So you get a low cut and you get a high cut. So if I bring it right here, and for now I'm just gonna bring this down, and I play something, we get the white noise and we can see it right here. And I'm gonna go up. Now if I go up on this one, what is happening? We are cutting low frequencies. So you can cut the lows of whatever sound source you're going to connect right here. And on this one, if I go the other side, we are just cutting high frequencies. That's the way it works. So now, let's say that this is the sound I want to blend. It sounds very dark. And then I want a little bit of oscillation. And we get that sound in the background. Now we can just make a blend with the noise and then just cut whatever we don't want and then go to the external signal in. Now, in this case, I'm just giving you an example with noise, but you could use whatever you want right here. Okay, so let's go back to a default and I want to talk about the envelope generator 1. Yes, this one, envelope generator 1, we already know how this works, but now we need to kind of learn how it works on the ins and outs. Now, if you go right here, it says envelope generator 1. And if you follow the instruction, it says that this one goes and modulates the frequency. We already know this one. This is one is connected right here if you follow the arrows. But then we get an out and we get a rev out. And then at some point it goes down here below to something that says VCA. We're going to talk about this. So first we need to cover this. It's going to say envelope 1. And what do you guess we can do with this one? The same thing we did with the triangle. We are just going to grab the out, which is the out of the envelope generator, the out of the envelope, and we can reuse it to do whatever we want. We can connect it to something else and just, to run that modulation. So in this case, for example, just to give you a good example, we are using the high pass filter, and we know that this one, it's connected to the EG2. And the EG2 is the envelope generator 2, the VCA, this one. So maybe I don't want that. Maybe what I want to do, I want to grab this one and connect the cutoff frequency. I'm going to do it with this one, with the low pass. It's going to be a little bit more obvious. So now the low pass, instead of using the, this envelope generator, is going to use this envelope generator. And I'm maybe going to go right there, bring a little bit of peak so we can hear it. And that's of course, the other one, this one. There we go. Something like that. So now, if I do attack, of course, that's happening to the volume. But notice that we get that wow, wow, wow. Well, that comes from here. If I make it really slow, notice it's super slow. If I make it really fast, it's super fast. So now we are using this envelope to rule this attenuator. Now it's not connected to EG2. Now it should be EG1. And we have a release time, of course, and we have a delay time. But most importantly, with this synthesizer is that, of course, we get a trigger. We can make use of that now. And then we have a loop. So now we can loop it. Something that we can do with the envelope generator 2. We don't have a loop. So that's what you get this out on the envelope generator. You can connect it to your cutoff, to your high pass filter, to your frequency. You can use the envelope to whatever you want. Now also you get the rev out, which is going to be the same thing, but the reversed envelope. And if I do something like that, it's just going to be a little bit, we are going to go to the gate now. We are using the rev out, right? Notice it sounds different. We start high and then we go low. And this one we start low and we go high. And again, we are just doing things in reverse. The envelope is inverted. So we start high and then we go low. High and low. That's the whole point. So maybe you're thinking, okay, so that's cool. We get to use the envelope generator to connect it to something else. Can we do it with the envelope generator 2? Yes, it's just right next to it. It says envelope generator 2, and then you get your out, and then you get your rev out. And this is something super useful because you don't have this on the original hardware. You just get your envelope generator 1, but you don't get something for the envelope generator 2. The only thing that you get on the envelope generator 2 is the rev out. And I'm talking on the the original hardware. But on this one you get the other one, the good one, let's say. And now let's say that on this one, on the cutoff frequencies, on this one, the high pass, we're going to be using this envelope generator, but then the other one, we are going to be using the normal one, which is the cutoff, the envelope generator 2. But maybe I just want to rev out. And now everything is going to start very differently, going to work very differently when we try to modulate things. Just going to sound differently because we are using different envelopes. But now you can choose what to use, and you're not just, limited by the pre-wiring of whatever you have right here. I'm going to be standing on the default patch again, and we need to talk about this part, the VCA. And notice it says it's kind of connected to the envelope generator. We're going to talk about this. But then it says control input and then in and out, and it says VCA. So of course, VCA means voltage control amplifier. And we kind of already have something like this. The envelope is it's controlling the amplitude. So when it goes right here, we just shape whatever we have with the envelope and then the sound goes out the way we want to. Well, this is something like that. But we can use it for different purposes. And let me give you an example. So I'm going to grab the square instruction and I'm going to go to the cutoff frequency. And we already know this example. That's why I'm using it. I'm bringing something of peak, and then when I go up, not this one, we get our square LFO modulating the cutoff frequency, and we couldn't know this. Now the thing is that as soon as I play a key, the modulation starts. And that's fine, that's the way it works. But what if we could just kind of add an envelope and just kind of introduce that modulation slowly and fade it out when we release a key or something like that? Well, we can. So that's the main purpose of this one. We are going to be shaping something and then going out. So in this case, we want to shape the square. So I'm going to go to the end of the square. Right now, if I play something, nothing happens, of course. So we're going to be going out, and I'm going to go out to the cutoff frequency. Right. So now, if I play a key, notice that the same thing's happening, but there's something different. Okay, so just for, just to give you an example, and before you say anything on the comments, I'm gonna just keep watching. I'm gonna connect, and we know that the envelope generator one, this one is the out, right? Now we know it. So if I connect it right here, what I want to do, I want to use this one to shape whatever is happening to the LFO. So if I play it and provide some attack time, maybe some release time and some delay time, notice it sounds different. It's just kind of entering. It's just slowly doing the modulation. And if I add some release and I release the keys, we go back slowly. That's the main point of this. We use an in signal that it's going to do something, then we shape it somehow with the input control, and then we go out and we use it on a different place. That's the main point. That's the goal. Now, right now we are doing that. What happens if I disconnect this one? Right? I'm not using an input control, a control input. I'm going to do it. I'm going to play a key, and it is still doing it. And it's because if you follow the lines, the control input, it's pre-wired to the envelope generator 1. So if we are going to use the envelope generator 1, we don't need to patch anything in because it's already using it. But maybe you just want to use a different thing. Let's say that you want to use the, the rev out of the input of the envelope generator 1. Well, that one is something that you need to patch in. And notice it sounds different. When I release the keys, then it goes and does do the modulation. We get high, we go down, I release the key, and then goes back. So yeah, if you want to use the envelope generator 1, you just don't need to connect it. But if you're going to use anything else, you do need to do the trick. Okay, that's fine. Hopefully, all of this is just very easy. And it's actually pretty easy. It's pretty simple to understand. It just looks confusing, that's all. Okay, so right now we are using an LFO, which is something pretty simple and pretty easy to hear. What if we wanted to use something else? Because we can. I'm going to disconnect the LFO, and I'm still going out somewhere. Maybe I'm going to start over again. So let me go back to a default patch. We start over, and now what I want to do, I want to use noise. And noise is something very useful in this synthesizer. Maybe you don't like noise, but you can do great things with noise. So we are going to be getting a white noise. And then, of course, we're going to go out to somewhere. So maybe I just want to go to the external signal in. So we know that when we do that, we are getting a blend of the mixers, the oscillators and the noise, but it's super loud. So it's just not, very controllable. And we know this. We could have already talked about this. But now remember that this one, the control input, this is going through the VCA of the envelope generator now, 1. So now we can add a little bit of that, and maybe even a little bit of delay. That is that play a key, you have a delay, and then it's just slowly growing. And when I release a key, it's going to slowly fade out with the rest of the sound. So yeah, very useful thing. Now, again, we are in the same spot than before. then the noise is just too noisy. So we can disconnect this, go through the ESP, and this is whenever you are maybe reading or finding information on the web, and you read ESP is the external signal processor. This is how it is. So we can low pass, we can cut the lows and cut the highs, in this case band pass, and just connect that one to this. This is why the external signal processor is kind of one of the most important parts of the patch bay, because we can process it somehow and get something different in return, get something else in return. So now, of course, it's going to sound very different if, of course, I'm just boosting. But if I want something very low, you can even cut the lows, cut a little bit of highs, and this is still going to be, it's still going to work. Let me just do something more normal, and something like that. Notice that we can hear the noise at the end. And we are just controlling the noise just a little, much better. Now we are just, working with a very dull sound. But if I go all the way down, we can hear and see that clearly when I play a key. And you can create a lot of different kind of types of, sound. You can do a lot of sound design just with noise. Now, one of the things that we do the whole time is just using the mod wheel. And this is something really useful. So if you follow the mouse, just follow the mouse, you get it right here. So it's the mod wheel there, right here. So you can connect this, and whatever you do with your mod wheel is going to be controlling it. Now, if you think about this input control just receives an input, and then it's going to control it with that. By default is the envelope generator 1, but if you connect the envelope generator 2, it's going to be the envelope generator 2. Right? And if you connect something else, it's going to be that something else. So for now, I'm just going to disconnect it. So let's say I want to do the same thing. I want to control it, but I want to control it with the mod wheel. So now when I connect my mod wheel, I'm pressing something and not getting anything. And right here, we get a representation of the mod wheel, so I can use it with the mouse. So when I go up, I allow the sound go up and then go down, and we can do it with the mod wheel. So now, of course, I'm doing it with the mouse, but you can use your MIDI keyboard control, your MIDI mod wheel. I'm moving it with the mod wheel right now, not with the mouse. Let me just put the mouse out. There you go. And now you have one more way, just another way to control whatever you do on this one. So let me go back to default. The ESP and this section are super important for us. Well, at some point, you're going to go always through here so you can control it somehow and then go out and run your modulation. Right, so now we're going to take a break, a tiny break from the synthesizer, and we need to talk about sample and hold. Now, if you already know how sample and hold, you can move on to the next part where we do it on the synthesizer, on the MS-20. But in this case, if you don't know how it is, it's going to be a little bit hard to explain on the synth. So I much prefer to take you to the grid, which is, something that you get on the Bitwig, where you can just build kind of your own synthesizer. It's a modular kind of a section, or I wouldn't say plugin, it comes with the DAW, but I'm just going to take you all the way and explain you how sample and hold works and what it is. Because if you don't know how it works, it's going to be, again, a little bit hard to explain on the synthesizer. Now, if you already know, you just can move forward. So on the MS-20, it's more like track and hold. It just works a little bit different. And there's a kind of a discussion right there. Some people say that it's the same thing and blah, blah, and so on. And I'm not going to go and enter into that. Now, what you need to know is that sample and hold, how it works. That's, the only thing you need to know. And it's a modulation. It's usually associated with noise to generate a random modulation. But you could use it with something else to generate something more predictable. Okay, so right here, we're on the grid. And this module is the sample and hold. This one will give us this sample and hold. Now, a sample and hold needs 3 different parts. And it's an input, and it's a time, or a clock. And then the output, it will be, our modulation. So this is, kind of what we need right here. Now, usually sample and hold works with noise, and throughout the history, you have a lot of synthesizers that use noise to create sample and hold. But you could use all different things. It doesn't really matter. It's just the source. Now, the idea is that this source will enter to the sample and hold generator, and something will take snapshots from this source, and each snapshot will be used to create a modulation instruction. I know it sounds simple, and maybe, it's kind of hard to imagine. So I'm going to be taking you all the way. So this is our sample and hold. Now, in this case, I'm going to use the kind of the widely known source for sample and hold, which is noise. So this one needs to go to the sample and hold generator. And if you are wondering how this looks like, it's just noise. This is a frequency spectrum. It's showing me, how this, looks. And it's just noise. It's just pure noise. Of course, we cannot hear it. And this is on purpose because it's going to be a little bit annoying. So at the end of the day, the sample and hold, what it needs to do, it needs to take a snapshot from the whatever sound source we have right here. In this case, noise or pink or whatever. And then at the end, it will output a modulation. Now, right now, we have nothing because there's nothing telling the sample and hold how to take snapshots from different parts of whatever is going on right here. So we don't have it. So what we need, we need something like a clock, So I'm going to go and just get a clock. So I'm going to be putting the clock right here. So the clock will tell the sample and hold, do this, and do that, and take this amount of time on each snapshot. And notice that we see something going up and down. So this is the modulation. Now, this module can give us a slow mode, which means that we can see what the sample and hold is doing. So there's a sound source coming in. We are using a clock to decide when to take a snapshot on that particular point in time, and then a modulation goes out. Now, since noise is a very unpredictable sound source, it can go up, can go down, and, we get something unpredictable. That's why noise is widely used or known to be used with sample and hold to create a random instruction. And this is the modulation that we can use on our synthesizer. It's going to go up and it's going to go down and so on and so on. So the clock is going to take the sample and hold. It's going to, tell the sample and hold how fast to take these snapshots. Right now, it's kind of on the slow side. So if I keep going down, it's going to be even, let me just go something like that. It's going to be super slow. But if I go faster, to something like that, it's going to be taking faster snapshots. And notice that the modulation just goes a little bit different because we are going faster. And at some point, we are going to be getting this random instruction. And let's say that we can connect this to our synthesizer and use it on the, the filter, the cutoff, or maybe the frequency, for example. We can just modulate it by this, going up and down. So if I wanted to create kind of an example of this, I could bring an audio out. I'm going to bring an ADSR, and this, I'm just kind of building a synthesizer right here. And then I'm going to bring a filter, and I'm going to connect, the parts. And then what do we need? Well, we need a sound. So I'm going to bring an oscillator. So we have a lot on the grid, a lot of different types of sounds. And I'm going to bring a sine wave and kind of, do something like this. And once I connect this, I play a key, and we should notice that something is going on right here. We are able to see something. I missed that part. And we are getting a sound because, we have an oscillator, we have a filter that's doing the job of filtering frequencies, and then it's going through the ADSR. Pretty simple, right? Just a pretty one oscillator synthesizer. And right here, we have an instruction. So this instruction is something that we can use to, do some modulation. Remember, this is what it's being outputted. So I can go right here and say, dude, I want to modulate this. And by doing this, we can just go maybe right here to the cutoff, just to give you an example. And I'm going to say, okay, so I want you to modulate by doing this, the cutoff. So now we are going to be getting a random instruction. So this is how the sample and hold works. It takes a source. We need a clock to know how fast the snapshots are going to be, and then it will output some kind of a modulation, and then we use it to, maybe in this case, create random. Now, of course, usually, again, the sample and hold, it's noise, but you don't need to use noise if you don't want to. You can bring something else, like, for example, let's say I want to bring an LFO, and I'm just maybe going to put it right here, and I'm going to bring this LFO. I'm going to be using this one. and I'm going to make it, positive and negative. So the sample and hold, of course, is going to be taking snapshots from this sound source. But notice that it's not super kind of unpredictable. It's not so unpredictable. It's very predictable. And let me just go slower, and it's going to be more predictable. And we are going to start to see kind of the same shapes, because this oscillator, this LFO, it's a sine. It's always the same motion. Since it's always the same motion, and at some point we are taking snapshots, it's going to be pretty much the same. So now the sound source is going to be a bit more predictable. Still sounds like random, but it's just pretty much the same positions. So you can use whatever as a sound source. Usually it's noise, but you can use an LFO or maybe a different synthesizer. All right, so this is how sample and hold works behind the scenes. Now, we know how it works. We know the logic. Now, let's go to the MS-20 and see how we can make it work right there. All right, so back on the MS-20, now we are going to use this, the sample and hold. Now, if you don't understand or you don't know what sample and hold is, you need to watch the previous section that you skipped, if you skipped it. So right here, I'm just going to use it and tell you how it works. So we have a clock. Remember, we need a clock to decide how the sample and hold will work. And then we have a sound source, an in, which is going to be whatever is going to be sample and hold. And then it's going to go out, right? That's the modulation that we are going to be using. So of course we need a sound source to make the sample and hold works, and we need a clock. So the clock, we can use the square, right here, the LFO. We can use it as a clock. And then of course we need a sound source. On sample and hold, usually the sound source is going to be noise. So I'm going to be using noise, white noise in this case. You can use pink if you want. So then, of course, this noise is going to be sample and hold with whatever you want. You have right here on the modulation as a trigger. And then we need to go out somehow. And in this case, I'm going to go to the cutoff frequency because it's just kind of very easy to hear. And I'm going to go right up there in peak. So, of course, we are connecting here. So we need to provide something right here. And there you go. We start to get, starting to get the sample and hold. And notice right there, it lights up. It is because it's recognizing the trigger of the clock. Now, you cannot argue that it sounds kind of weird. And it's because, remember, this one is more, instead of sample and hold, it's drag and hold. So, but if you grab your modulation and you go all the way to the other side and you make it really thin, now it works like a trigger. And now we get a much better kind of a sample and hold, which is random, right? So that's the way that this, module works. You need to use something that will decide how fast you can take those snapshots, then a sound source, and then you're going out. Pretty simple. So what if you wanted to do the same thing, but maybe on the frequency? That's going to be a pretty obvious example. If I go to frequency, instead of doing that, we are going to be doing the classic, kind of a computer sound. Up and down with sample hold, going on a random fashion. Right. Now, remember that you can use the other sound source because it's gonna, it's gonna be the pink noise. And sometimes the pink noise works a little bit better because you have other types of frequencies going on right there. So sometimes it works a little bit better. You might want to try the pink or the white noise. Now, remember that this clock is very important for us, is the one deciding how, we should trigger. But you can use whatever you want. You can use an external sound source. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But you can use something else. Let's say I don't want to use this as a clock. I want to use something else. So if I disconnect it, of course, we have no clock. So it's going to sound like that. But maybe I want to use this. Notice that this funny little drawing right here looks like a button or something. Well, this is going to be the momentary switch. This is the switch. And notice you get something that says ground and all over the place. So, of course, on the original hardware, right now we have an emulation and it's trying to do that. But on the real synthesizer, everything is voltage. So, in this case, when the momentary switch is going to react to whenever we kind of press the button, and it's going to allow something go in or, block it. So if I connect it right here, now if I play something, we get nothing. And I'm going to try to do it with both hands. I'm going to be playing this key. Doesn't matter which one. And now I'm going to do the momentary switch. And notice what's going on. I do it again, and if I tap it rapidly, we are getting that sample and hold vibe. So the momentary switch, it's going to act or be used as a gated trigger in this case. In this case, we are using it as a clock, which is maybe not that good idea because we can hear a lot of that noise. Maybe this control, so maybe the square is better as a better thing to use as a clock, but you can use this for different type of different things. We're gonna use it in a minute. But this is what the momentary switch and what this button means. So since we are talking about the switch and triggers, I'm gonna go all the way back to a default batch, and we are gonna be talking about a lot of the things that are happening right here. So again, we get the keyboard ground, but we also get the keyboard trig. Trig out, trig in, so on and so on and so on. And if you read right here and you follow the line, it says keyboard. And then if you go right here, it's gonna be going right there, and it goes to the envelope generator 2, and then we get a kind of a patch point right here, but then it keeps going forward and goes to the envelope generator 1. Okay, so what's happening behind the scenes, and all of this is just pre-wired, we don't see it. When we press a key, we are letting the sound of the oscillator go through whatever, path, the signal path. And then at some point is going to kind of reach this section, the envelope generator 2. This one is going to decide when to let the volume or the sound go. And then it's going to close it. It's kind of a gate-ish. But in this case, it works like an envelope. It's letting the sound go, through. It's going to shape it somehow in terms of volume, and then the sound goes out, right? That's how it works. Now, how this envelope generator 2 knows when to do its job, It knows because we are pressing a key and it's listening to something that it's telling this envelope generator 2 when to do its job, when to open and close. So that's going to be the trigger. We are triggering this envelope, it's doing its job, letting the sound pass, and then we can hear something. That's how it works. So that's why you get this ins right here and the out right here. So this one, it's connected to the keyboard. So every time that we play a key, this trigger is triggering, and it's triggering the envelope 2, and it's triggering the envelope 1. And by default, it's connected to the keyboard. But what if we decide to disconnect it from the keyboard, right? So, okay, so we can. That's why we get the ins and the outs. So if I plug something right here, I'm breaking that pre-wired connection. I'm just breaking it. And I'm going to be using the momentary switch because now we know it. So now remember, this one is a trigger. Now we are saying don't use the keyboard to trigger the envelopes. Use my momentary switch. So if I play something, nothing happens. And that's because we are breaking that connection. And we are saying, dude, now the momentary switch is the one doing the trigger. So if I play a key and I'm playing it right here, nothing is going to happen until I trigger with my momentary switch. And if I, play a button, it's going to let the sound go through because we are just opening or letting the envelope know or triggering the envelope with the button. Right, so same thing happens to the EG1. Now, right now, we are just connecting it here, and this will affect pretty much everything. Envelope 2 and envelope 1. But in this case, maybe I want to keep the envelope generator 2 listening to the keyboard, and I only want to mess with the envelope generator 1. And I'm going to do just that. I'm going to connect it to the EG1 in. So now, if I play a key, notice I'm playing keys, it sounds because, of course, we are not disabling the pre-wiring of the envelope generator number 2. The line is not affected. But this one, it is. The envelope generator 1, it is affected. So if I do something with the envelope generator 1, like, I don't know, maybe this one, maybe the pitch, maybe I'm going to do something like this. We can hear the envelope generator 1 modulating right here the VCOs. The pitch. But I'm going to go right here, and every time I press the button, I'm re-triggering this envelope, so it's kind of doing its job again. So think of this as a loop, but on demand. What we do when we press the button, we are restarting the envelope, so it's doing its job again, but it's not doing it on a loop. It's doing it on demand when we, of course, press the button. you can get pretty cool sounds because now you're doing it on demand. Now, maybe we want to use the same thing. I'm going to go down and we want to do the same thing on the cutoff frequencies. I'm going to use that envelope generator 1 on the cutoff frequency. So I'm going to be doing some cutting, a little bit of peak right here so we can really hear what's going on. If not, nothing's going to happen. So now, maybe let me do something a little bit of that. We are on the low pass. Maybe it's too slow. All right. So now, notice I'm playing. Nothing happens. If I disconnect it, it's triggering. And it's because, remember, we are just killing that connection between the keyboard and the trigger. So now it will only react to my trigger. Right? That's the point. So yeah, you can just, do amazing things with this. So back to a default patch, I'm going to give you a different example. Because right now you get the trigger in, which is cool, but then you get the trigger out. And this is also related to the keyboard. And then you have the aftertouch. I believe I don't need to explain this. It's just the aftertouch. It depends on if you have aftertouch on your keyboard, you can use it to run some kind of a modulation or to affect a modulation. In this case, we have the trigger out. Let me give you an example. Let's say I want to use it as a clock, right? I'm going to go and just patch it as a clock. And I want to use it, I want to use the sound source. I'm going to use the noise, and we kind of already should know how this works. And I'm going to grab this one, and I'm going to use it as a modulation for the cutoff frequencies. So if I play key, of course, nothing happens. I'm going to need to kind of adjust the cutoff so we can hear something that, something happening. And I'm going to give it a peak, and I'm going to maybe go up on the release time, something like that, so we can hear the tail of the sound. And then, of course, since we are providing something, I'm going to be doing some kind of a modulation with the sample and hold. So I'm going to be pressing a key. Notice that we get nothing. We are getting the sound, but nothing happens. And if I disconnect this one right here, it's just kind of a sustaining. Well, that's not the whole point. We are using the trigger, and when I release it, it's going to let pass whatever we are doing, because this is the trigger out. It's going to react when we just, finish or we release the key. We get the trigger is just doing its job, and then when we release it, it's doing it. It's a little bit different from what's going on with the trigger in. If I disconnect it and use the momentary switch, it's going to let it pass the trigger switch. We need to press it in order to kind of stop it. The other one is backwards. It's going to happen when we release the keys. I'm going to play it, nothing happens, and I release it, and then it's letting pass. And notice how the clock looks. It's just opened, nothing else. And again, you can just create really cool sounds. We can even go through the noise processor and just, make this sound a little bit better. But yeah, you can, use the trigger out to do some other tricks. So back to a default patch, and I need to talk about the EG2 sidechain. And remember, this is not something that we get on the original hardware. We get something like this, but it's called, it has a different name. It's called initial gain. And actually, this is a better implementation because when you do something to initial gain, you are occupying a patch point. You're occupying an in and an out. And maybe you want to do some tremolo, right? And so you need to do the kind of the patching and all and everything else, but you're kind of using some sound source to do that simple dump tremolo. In the case of this synthesizer, you already get it by default. If I go up on this one, we are using that triangle to do that tremolo. On the original hardware, we needed to do something like this, but by doing it, we are just kind of a pre-wiring, right? We are reusing or kind of occupying a sound source, which could be something useful to do different things. So, but in this one, you just get it. Now, in this case, we are using a triangle. So, if we get it right here, what is the point of having an EG2 sidechain? So the EG2 sidechain means that whatever you plugged right here is going to be controlling that modulation. In this case, is a triangle, but maybe I want a square. So whatever I patch right here is going to be now used to do that tremolo behavior. And now, of course, we are using the square, and it sounds like a square. And of course, this one is the attenuator. We can do less, or we can go really aggressive. We can get that sound. maybe you're asking, or maybe you're wondering, so maybe you're wondering yourself, right now we can use this and this, right? Which is, a very simple LFO. Can we get more complex LFOs? Yes, you can. And we are going to be talking about this in a minute. But first, I want to cover the master in that you get right here and the signal out. So the master in, it's something really simple. And if you hover right here, it's going to say right here at the bottom. And it says, provide the incoming signal directly to the output stage. So wherever you connect right here, it will bypass whatever you're doing right here and go out directly. It's going to be a little bit annoying and a little bit noisy because you're bypassing all the things that, make the synthesizer sound like a synthesizer. You're just getting, in this case, kind of an oscillator. And if I play keys, notice it's just, you get something like that. This doesn't work, nothing works. If I do the attack time, decay time, nothing works. It's just going out, and at some point, of course, it's dying. So you're just getting that oscillator out in this case. All right, so let me just go back to default again. So maybe you're wondering again, what is the point of doing all of this? Oh, and if you didn't notice, the out of this one and the out of this one is the out of the oscillators without going through the circuit, without going through the stages, the cutoff and the envelopes and everything else. It's just going directly out. So what is the point of having a master in or maybe a signal out, even the oscillators? And it's because you do have something to process the signal and then just, feed it back. And this is something very useful and something very common we do with the MS-20. We go through something, we really crank it up, and then it goes out. For example, right now we get the signal out. Now this one, it's equal to the out of the synthesizer. Whatever comes out of the synth, going, through the different stages, the envelopes, the filters, and all the things that we have available. And then this goes out. Well, in this case, if we have, for example, an interface, an audio interface, we could grab this cable and connect it to that audio interface. And that is going to be, how you do on the original hardware. You just connect whatever out you have right here and you put it, on your PA or whatever, and you get the sound. Now, in this case, what we can do, since of course this is a plugin, is already going out, what we can do is go to the signal processor. And now whatever comes out of here is going to go to the ESP and we can process it somehow. Now, of course, we are going through the signal processor, but we are not getting it from the signal processor. So that's why you get this one, you get this, no, maybe the cable's kind of in the way. That's why you get the master in. Because we are processing sound and then we go out and then we can go back to the master in this case. So now we are going through a different stage and then going out. And what we can do with this one, we can crank it all the way up. We can even do some cutting right here. We can cut some frequencies. And if I go up, what do we get? We get distortion, right? I can go to this one and adjust it. And notice how right here, everything and the sound, everything is changing. Maybe not this one, this one. We just can shape it and even go right here at the top and just really crank it up. Right now I'm using one single oscillator, but once you just get, something really... There's a difference. That's the normal sound. If I crank it up, we're going to get a lot of distortion. Yeah, that's the point. That's the point of doing all of this. And this is something that we do with the MS-20, pretty much the whole time. We just connect the out, we do the signal in, and then we go out just to get a really cranked up sound. Even going right here from this and going to the external signal, external in is going to give you, just a completely different sound because you're just kind of saturating it. And the best example you could think of is the song from Daft Punk, Da Funk. That's, a patch where you go, you take the signal, you just distort it, you just destroy it, and then you go back. That's a kind of a classic example of that. So back to default, and I want to talk about the things that we get on the external signal, the ESP. We already know that we can signal in and crank it up. Then we know that we can cut the lows, cut the highs, and then go out, and so on and so on. But we have more things. And the first thing is going to be the F to B. So it's going to be frequency to voltage. So what we can do, we can grab some sound source, whatever sound source, and then it's going to convert it to voltage, so we can kind of use it as a modulation source. Now, of course, I'm telling you this, and it makes sense when I'm telling you, but since this is a plugin, it makes no sense because it's a plugin. But on the original hardware, sometimes when you grab maybe a different synthesizer, you could just bring a sound source from a different synthesizer and just patch it right here, maybe on the signal in, and that sound is going to be converted to voltage, and that voltage you're going to be using it to, modulate the cutoff frequency. And it's super useful because you're not just tied or bound to use an LFO or whatever sound source that you get right here. You get an external kind of a signal. Now, the problem is that this is a plugin. We are on the plugin land. We don't have an external synthesizer. And that is, kind of the bad thing. But you do get a good thing. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So don't worry. So, for example, I'm going to go right here and bring you to my DAW. And for now, I'm just going to close this. And this is the DAW. This is where I'm recording all of this. So I have a couple of things right here. So the first thing is going to be the test tone. It's going to be a little bit loud, so let me just gonna go down. Okay, so this is the sound. This is a test tone, and it's providing a test tone. If I go up, we're going to be hearing some sound source. But as I go down, this sounds, notice that we can change the waveforms. This is going to be an LFO. It goes really slow, and it's using a saw. So we got a saw LFO. But this is happening on a different part of my DAW. So what if we could reuse this test tone, this LFO that is happening someplace, and I'm just going to go up in, volume, but this one is kind of controlling it. So what if we want to use this test tone or this modulation right here on this synthesizer? Well, we can. I'm going to go to the channel where my MS-20 is loaded. And depends on your synthesizer, you will have a sidechain button right here. In the case of Bitwig, you have it right here. This is your sidechain. If you're in a different DAW, you will need to find out how plugins can receive sidechain. By default, the VS3 of this one, or maybe the VS2 one right now, can receive sidechain information. So what we want to do, we want to listen to other channels, and we are going to be grabbing that signal, and we are going to be reusing it right here. How great is that? It's like, let's pretend that this is a different synthesizer, and we are just, patching whatever other synthesizer here to use it as a modulation source, right? Okay, so let me just give you an example. Right here, I'm going to go to the sidechain, and this is the one we want to listen. And notice that this one is outputting something, the test tone out. I'm going to select it. So now our KORG MS-20 is listening to this. The problem is, from where can we get it? So we get it from here. External out. So if I patch it to the master in, we are going to be getting it. And the sound that we hear is happening on our instance of the, this plugin, right? How great is that? So we can use this, again, maybe as a trigger. If I want to do a clock, we can use it as a trigger. Now, I'm going to show you something more useful. Let's say that maybe I want to use a kick. Let me just show you my kick. I'm going to do play. Maybe it's a little bit too loud. This is my kick, right? And it's just a kick. So what I want to do, I want to kind of use this kick on this one. So I'm going to be changing this, and I'm going to use the pre, it's all the way down the volume so we don't have to hear it. So the pre, now it's going to be our signal. So, okay, so now this one, it's listening to the kick, and I want to use it on something. Now the kick has a very specific kind of a waveform, and then a very specific sound. So what I want to do, I want to grab this sound source, convert it to voltage, and then use or reuse the voltage to run a modulation. So in this case, we can. I'm going to go back to default just in case. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to grab the kick we have on the sidechain, and I'm going to process it with the signal in. Now, if I go out, notice that it's listening right here. So if I go out of here and maybe go to the external signal in, or maybe just the master in, we hear it. Right. But that's not what I want to do. I want to grab the sound source and convert it to voltage so we can run a modulation. So now I'm going to go to the cutoff frequencies. Now the cutoff is going to be listening or waiting for voltage to run a modulation, just like we do with the LFO. This is all voltage. So I'm going to be using that. So I need to use this one. So when I go right here and I add a little bit of peak and I press something, notice it's happening. Not too aggressive, but it's happening. So now the kick is converted to voltage, and we are using that voltage to modulate the cutoff. That's the whole point. You can still go really loud on this one or change the amplitude. Notice it's going to be doing less or it's going to do a little bit more. You can even shape whatever is going on right here, because at the end of the day, this modifies it. And notice it says CV adjust. Now, it depends on the sound source. You're going to need to adjust this. And again, you're going to be getting less or you're going to be getting more. Also, the sound, the amplitude of whatever you have right here is going to affect whatever you get right there. But that's the trick. Now you can use a different sound source and convert it to voltage and reuse it to do some kind of a modulation. Okay, so I'm gonna move on to this ones right here, and these ones are pretty simple to understand now that we know this one. And remember, we get the external out, and then we go and we do a modulation on the cutoff frequencies, and we are kind of using that kick that we have right here to do the modulation. And of course, we need to allow some kind of modulation in order to kind of do it. But you need to notice, and I'm gonna go really aggressive on this one, that whatever we are doing right here, it just works in a very specific way. Now, this is not ultra aggressive. I mean, we can go aggressive, but it's not super aggressive, Depends on what you're doing right here. But what we can do, instead of doing this, we can use an envelope out. So it says right here, envelope follower. So this will listen to whatever incoming signal, and it will create an envelope out of that. So this will listen to the envelope follower will listen. So the envelope follower will listen to whatever incoming signal. It doesn't matter if, it's a sound from here or it's a sound from an external like a sidechain, but it's going to listen to it and then create an envelope and follow it. That's why it's called envelope follower. And that envelope, we can reuse it to do a modulation. And this is the envelope out. So instead of using frequency to voltage, we can use the envelope out. Now it's going to sound different. Now this is very different. So all these knobs right now are not going to really do anything. The amplitude will, because this is the volume of the signal that goes in. And different volumes, managing your level is going to give you different things. Now the envelope that we are using right here is ultra aggressive. Because, it has no idea how to do it. We don't have an attack, release, sustain, decay. It's just grabbing, converting the sound source we have right here and doing the modulation. So you're gonna need, of course, to think about whatever sound source you're using. Maybe a kick is not a good idea. Maybe some other sound source is a good idea. This, of course, depends on what you want to do. At the end of the day, that's what it means. You can use this envelope out to do something else on the cutoff frequencies, and at the same time, we can use the triangle that we have right here and just start to get, cool sounds. Maybe I want some modulation right here. This one's, and maybe make it bigger. And there you go. You just need to do a little bit of experimentation. Maybe we want a sample and hold or something like that. So we can bring this, or maybe we just want to do some noise. So you can do a million things with with this synthesizer, and you can do even more with the plugging because you have a lot more kind of possibilities. So I'm gonna go back again. I'm always starting from a default patch, so you can kind of follow what I'm doing and do the same thing at home. That's the point of this. So we have the envelope. We can convert frequency to voltage, but we also can use as a trigger. So when I bring the kick in and it's playing in the background, notice that the trigger is kind of moving. It's just lighting up and it's following the kick. If I bring the kick, we can see that every time the kick hits, this is creating a trigger. So we can use this trigger for something else. That's the point. So of course, the kick right now is just pretty long. Maybe we can use something very small just to provide a very small kind of a, trigger. But the threshold level will help you to kind of catch or fine tune the trigger and everything else. If I go too low, notice everything is happening. If I go too high, the threshold is too high, so it's always opened. So that's not going to help, that's not going to help much. Same with the envelope out, of course. Now, I want to use this, and maybe I'm going to put it right here. So we can use this maybe as a trigger. Maybe I'm going to be going right here, and I'm going to be putting it on the trigger of the envelope. So every time that the kick hits, it's kind of triggering whatever key that we have available. So if I play a different note, now that one gets, that key is what we hear. But what this is doing is that the kick is triggering the envelopes of our synthesizer. And again, we can sync this to some other sound source and use it like this. And this is something that you can do with the original hardware. Now, the problem is that with the original hardware, since it's a synth from the 78, I guess that was the Mark 1, I guess. On the classic version, it used S triggers, which is a different way of triggering something. It's a different trigger. It just works in a different way. It's like the opposite. So nowadays we use V triggers. It's kind of the standard these days. So in this case, of course, you have a plugin. You don't need to worry about S triggers or V triggers. But if you buy the hardware, you need to be aware of how it's triggering because it's a different way of triggering. At the end of the day, you can use a converter and do the same trick. But, if you buy the hardware, you need to be aware of that, it comes with those challenges because it's a very kind of an old recreation or very old synth if you have the original one. So we need to talk about this section we have right here. It says VZO in, VZO 1 and 2, this CV in. So this one pretty much works with the keyboard. Now, if you think about this, how it works behind the scenes, any synthesizer, not on plugin land, on synthesizers and hardware synthesizer as well, is that whenever you play a key, this is going to be providing some kind of information to the synth that you're playing this key, and this key, it has a frequency, and that voltage is a representation of that key. So when you change keys, it's a different voltage, so on and so on and so on. So the synth knows how to read that from the keyboard, and it's going to play, your tone. But of course, all of this happens in voltage. Now, in this case, of course, this is a plugin. It just works in a different way, but this is a representation of that. So you get this, the 1 and 2 CV in. So this one, what pretty much does, what it's going to do is that it listens to the keyboard so the synth knows what to play when you play different tones, different keys. So if you use this one for something else, you're just kind of disconnecting or reusing whatever sound that you are getting from the keyboard for something else, And let me just give you an example. You have the CV in right here. So this one, it says it's going to be receiving it from the keyboard. Notice that the keyboard goes right here. So right now, so far, the pre-wiring is that the keyboard is listening to this, so the synth knows what we can play. But if I disconnect it and bring something else, you're disconnecting the keyboard, so the synth will not listen to the keyboard anymore, and it's listening to something else to, of course, play your tones and play your frequencies. So if I play a key, we don't get the keyboard anymore. The keyboard, what it does right now, it's doing the trigger that we get right here below, It's just triggering the envelope. But it has no idea what I'm playing because the keyboard's not controlling the frequencies anymore. What it's controlling the frequencies, or, what we do, is going to be the LFO. Right? So, yeah, we are just disconnecting that part and we are just doing something else. And let me just give you a different example. Let's say that I want to control and sweep the frequencies. So we have a mod wheel. And the mod wheel is just going to do that. It's going to output some kind of a voltage from down and up. And we are going to be doing that as an input, as a CV in for the oscillators. So now if I play a key, nothing happens. But if I go to the mod wheel, it's going to sweep the frequencies, because this control now is the one deciding which frequency we should play, not the keyboard anymore. The keyboard is going to be stuck on whatever we have selected right here. So if I put it maybe there, all the keys will do the same. And again, this is something that you could use for the sound design for some effects or something like that. All of this is just useful. It depends on, how you're using it. So then if I disconnect this one, you get the same thing, but for the VCO2. Now the VCO1 has no in for this. So you cannot do it for the VCO1. It's either the 1 and the 2 at the same time or just the 2. So if I grab my mod wheel and I say, all right, so I want to do the same thing, disconnect the keyboard on the VCO2 and I'm going to bring it. Now we are listening to the 1 and it's listening to the keyboard. We can see that and hear that. But when I bring the VCO2 is stuck on whatever it is that we are doing on the mod wheel. And we can create again cool sounds with this. So that's the whole point of having, this too. Now then you have the other ones, which is going to be the keyboard CV out and the velocity and the aftertouch. These ones are pretty obvious, but maybe not that much. Now on pretty much on all synthesizers, you have a way to kind of control what's going on with the filter whenever you play keys, and that is the keyboard control. You even get it on the Moog, which is, something pretty old. And you don't get it on default, by default, this one. You do get something very similar with the velocity of the sidechain. We already talked about this, but you don't get it by default. So let me just give you kind of the right example. I need to kind of search for this. Let me do something like this. And I'm going to do a peak so we can see where the peak is. Right. Now, if I do something like that, it doesn't matter right now, but if I play, let me just go down, and I'm going to do it with the mouse so you can see what I'm playing. I'm going to do it right here. I'm going to start in low frequencies, and I'm going to go up and maybe do more peak. Right. So when I play a key, we can see that the peak is right here, right? And as I move up, the peak is kind of shifting a little bit, but not really. It's always on the same place. And it's because, of course, we are cutting frequencies, and the peak, the cutoff, it's not moving when we play keys. The peak always stays kind of around this point. And this makes sense. We are cutting frequencies and we are saying, okay, the breakpoint, the peak is right here on this breakpoint. And it's not changing even if we are playing low keys or we are playing high keys. It doesn't matter. That's always the breakpoint. So what we care about this is that the keyboard out will output some kind of a voltage. So we can use this to instruct the cutoff to be brighter or less bright or react differently whenever we play different frequencies or different keys. So if I bring this and I put it right here on the cutoff frequencies, I'm going to be playing this and I'm just going to go up on this one. Notice that the sound is changing by a lot. We're doing a lot of peak. I'm going to go down. And now I'm going to do the same trick. I'm going to start going low. We can see that the peak is right here. But now remember, the CB is providing some information in how this cutoff should move when we play different keys. So we're kind of providing different voltage on different keys. So as we go up, the cutoff, notice that resonance peak is going to start to move, especially when we go to higher keys. So this means that the keys are going to sound a little bit different if you go to higher frequencies, because the cutoff is like moving like this when we go to higher keys, or is it just going down if you go to lower keys? Again, this is just a keyboard control. We could use it as a keyboard control. It's not really a keyboard control because it just works a little bit different on some other synthesizers, but we can use it like this. If I disconnect it and I do the same thing, notice that everything sounds super dark. But when I bring this, the higher keys are brighter because they're opening a little bit more, and the lower keys sound dark. So you could be playing something really low, and you hear the higher frequencies because you're cutting a lot. But if I disconnect it and I do the same thing, now the higher keys sound really, dark. This kind of gives you a different way of, just playing your whatever it is that you need to play. You can have the higher keys sound a little bit brighter and the lower keys, sound a little bit kind of darker, or just, sound kind of in their normal kind of a spot. So then you get something similar with the velocity CV out. And this works pretty much like this one. If I grab this one and connect it right here, this one is going to react, but it's not going to react to the frequency. It's going to react to the velocity of the keyboards. So I'm going to be using my MIDI keyboard, and we are doing the same thing with it before. We are providing some kind of instruction right here. So if I go really kind of a smooth or slow, we get some kind of a modulation. Now, if I do it hard, we get a lot more. And I'm really doing it hard right now. If I go all the way, it's going to be a lot of, pretty obvious. I'm going really smooth. I'm playing this key right here. And if I go hard, the modulation is just, greater. It's because this one, when we do hard, the CB is just going to be a lot more, but it's going to be a lot less if we play soft. And this is, again, something very common that we get on a lot of synthesizers. So you can just make if I press rapidly and I change how I press the keys, if I go slow and then I go harder and then slower, we can create kind of a, modulation. That's the whole point. And then you get the other one, which is going to be the aftertouch. And all of this is just very simple at this point. These are kind of a standard things that you could do. So you get the aftertouch. Right now, we are not doing anything. Let me do something like that. I'm going to press a key. We get that. Now, aftertouch is not how hard you press the keys if you don't know what aftertouch is. Whenever you have a MIDI keyboard that supports aftertouch, if your MIDI does not support aftertouch, you cannot do it. I'm pressing a key, but if I press it down, it's going to trigger a modulation, or it's just going to trigger whatever it is that we are doing. So this is one is listening to that aftertouch. So I'm pressing a key, I'm going to press harder, I'm going to just push down in 3, 2, 1, now, and we run the modulation. That's, the aftertouch. And if and that's, we can use the aftertouch just like this. Now I'm just giving you a dumb example just with the cutoff frequencies, but you could do it with whatever you want right here. These are expressions. Okay, so let's talk about the last thing. This is something that you get. I'm not going to go through this a lot because this guide is already too long. I'm going to give you just a tiny tip of how this works, what this is. So before we can do this, notice that right here, when you start in default patch, it's going to say poly, but in fact, this synth, it's mono. If I do a chord, you just cannot do a chord, right? And I'm doing a chord. So it's a mono by default. But you can turn this into a polysynth. So I can do 4 voices. I can, play a chord. Now, when you do this, you might be getting a message saying that, dude, this is a mono synth. If you're going to use a polysynth, make it a polysynth, it's going to consume a lot of resources. So, maybe you should keep it mono. But it's just, warning, this is going to consume a lot more. Then if you are cool with that, that's, fine. But now you can do chords. Cool. So what's the trick with this? And I'm going to bring unison, and I'm going to bring 2 oscillators. So since you're using many voices, this is going to help you to get that analog vibe, because when you use analog, not all synthesizers, not all different voices, not everything is just very in tune. So this is going to add dispersion, and dispersion means that it's just going to make it, a little bit more. And notice that we can hear it. And especially when we use doing unison, because we are using many voices and we are stacking them, they sound pretty much in phase together. And if I go up, it sounds different. It's like we are going up on the unison and kind of detuning them. Well, it's because this one, the pitch, is going to add that dispersion. It's going to make the voices a little bit different. It's going to separate it from each other. It's going to make it a little bit more analog-ish, right? And this is doing it with the pitch, but you can do it with the pulse width, you can do it with the envelopes, you can do it with the resonance, cutoff, and modulation. So maybe doing a little bit of all of that is going to give you this analog vibe that, everything's just going to be a little bit offset from from what it is from default. And again, it's just going to give you that analog vibe. That's the point. And at this point, this is something that you get on a lot of the new synths from Arturia. You know, this Persian kind of a module that you get, you know, this panel. And it's really cool, you know, just can get really cool sounds, and maybe you want that a little bit of dispersion, you can just go and fine tune how it works. So that's it. So hopefully you liked all of this. Remember to like and subscribe if you like what I do. And if you, if you got something out of this and you learned something, remember that if you want to buy me a coffee, you can. You can go at the description. You have PayPal. You have, the YouTube thanks right now. You have, Patreon. You can go to Patreon and be maybe a month patron. And just buy me a coffee, man. You can do it. Now, if you don't have the money or you're struggling, please don't do it. You know, you're struggling. You don't need to spend money. This is, a free resource at the end of the day. You do it if you want and if you can. So, thanks for watching, and see you on the next time, on the next one, which is going to be the sequencer.